They let him go the same morning he posted our Happy Father's Day selfie. Name's Clarence 58. Small business accountant still keeps his old employee badge in a sock drawer. You ever hold back a smirk when karma shows up in business casual? The napkin was folded wrong. That's the first thing I noticed. It sat on my lap like a shrug-creased lopsided embroidery half hidden. I'd ordered them special months ago. Cream linen navy blue thread, spelling out Roslyn and Heath Oct 2022. $17 a piece. I'd done the math. Maybe I should have taken the napkin as a sign. A whisper of misalignment. But I didn't. I just sat there with my name engraved nowhere and my hands shaking under the soft table light, pretending everything was fine. Rustic bulbs dangled overhead, giving the horse barn that Pinterest glow. A soft hum of conversation wrapped the tables like flannel. Someone's kid chased a chicken out back. And there she was, Roslyn, my daughter, standing in heels. Too tall for gravel, looking radiant and smug, and so far away from me, even though she was only 15 feet across the lawn. First, thank you all for being here today, she said, lifting a champagne flute. To my amazing bridesmaids, thank you for planning the perfect weekend. To Heath's parents, thank you for welcoming me into your family. And to Mom, Roslyn turned smile-beaming hand outstretched to Delora, who dabbed her eye and looked like she might faint from pride. Thank you for teaching me grace and humor, and never letting me leave the house with chipped nails, soft laughter, clinks of glasses. Then she paused. Her eyes flitted across the crowd. For half a second, they landed on me. Just enough to reset her smile. And to Dad, she said thank you for always keeping the books, not feelings. Laughter again, brisker this time. A few heads turned my way. I smiled. At least I think I did. My cheeks were numb. Not feelings. That line, it hung there sticky and sweet, like the lemon glaze dripping off the slice of cake I hadn't finished. Roslyn always had a clever tongue, sharp when she wanted. I remembered when she was 11 delivering a book report on The Great Gatsby in a sequined headband and ending it with, "So yeah, dreams die." That's the point. She got the wit from Delora. The distance, too. I watched the napkin in my lap slip sideways again as I shifted. I could still hear Roslyn thanking the DJ, the florist, even the horse that pulled the carriage. Not me. Not really. My glass was still full. No one had noticed, so I stood quietly and raised it anyway. To love, I said into the void, mostly to myself, and to accurate invoices. Then I turned left the half-eaten cake and slipped out through the side of the tent. The cool October air hit like a mercy. A breeze carried the smell of hickory smoke from the pit. Someone had burned the brisket. My phone buzzed in my jacket. A reminder, final catering payment due tomorrow. $3,200. I stared at it, then tapped. New message. To Whitaker Events, subject urgent body. Please cancel remaining services under account number 61402. Do not proceed with breakfast service. No further charges authorized. I reread it. No typos, no emotion, just like she said I did things. My thumb hovered. I could still undo this. I could let the brunch happen. Let the guests enjoy their mimosas and tiny quiches. But something in me had already snapped. Or maybe it had frayed years ago under a pile of college bills, silence, and car rides, split holidays. Maybe this was the final tug. I pressed send. And then I stood there under the rustic lights, watching as the reception swirled behind me, full of people I didn't know anymore. The napkin, still crumpled in my hand, slipped into my coat pocket. The first time I cooked a meal for Roslyn, I nearly burned the apartment down. Not literally, but close enough. Garlic smokes fast when the pan's too hot, and I didn't know then that you weren't supposed to toss it in before the oil settled. It hissed and spit like it was insulted. Smells like... You tried, Roslyn said, setting her backpack on the counter and towing off one sneaker. She was 14 braces on hoodie too big for her frame sleeves, chewed on from nerves she didn't show. I stood at the stove, my thumb wrapped in a paper towel, the blood soaking through. It's not Mom's cooking, I said, trying to laugh. But it's warm, she finished for me with a shrug. We didn't have a dining table then. Just a tall butcher block I'd bought secondhand from a guy named Ernie who ran a lawnmower repair shop out of his garage. The stools didn't match. The ceiling light buzzed. Still, I wanted to make the night feel like something, like a beginning. I reached into a kitchen drawer and pulled out 2 cream-colored napkins. One had her name stitched on the corner R. Madison, because it felt more formal than just Roslyn. I'd paid a woman at church $15 to embroider them. Didn't tell Roslyn, she blinked at it. Are we doing a wedding reception now? No, I said, placing one beside her plate. Just supper, looks fancy. She laid it across her lap. Not perfectly, but she noticed. That was enough. We ate in silence for a bit. She twirled noodles and scraped the side of her plate for sauce. I tried not to stare. Tried not to overinterpret every bite like it was a referendum on my parenting. Later that night, she curled on the sagging couch watching reruns on a laptop. I went out to the narrow patio, lit a cigarette, and called Wes. Wes was one of those guys who always answered on the second ring like he was expecting the world to need him. Still breathing, he asked. Barely. Burned dinner, sliced my thumb. Pretty sure the kid thinks I'm incompetent. She already thought that he deadpanned. I chuckled. You get the memo from HR? He sighed. Yeah. No more 401k match. Everything's self-managed now. I don't even know what half those funds mean. You and me both. We need to start a group or something. Community pot. Mutual aid. Some kind of safety net. I remember staring out at the dumpster, its lid hanging crooked like a bad metaphor. Yeah. Might be time. That's when the seed was planted. Wes and I didn't have much, but we started meeting every other week, him, me, a few other guys from work, looking over statements, pooling ideas. I made a spreadsheet on my old laptop. We called it the Unretirement Club. Inside, I cleaned up the kitchen. The stove was still warm, Roslyn's plate empty, but the napkin, that simple stitched napkin, was neatly folded. Not crumpled, not balled up and tossed. Folded, carefully, corner to corner. That was her way of saying it mattered. That winter, we repeated that routine more than once. Burned food, awkward silences, quiet victories. I learned to cook. She learned to sit still long enough to eat with someone who wasn't her mom. One night, she even helped. Don't stir the sauce like that, she said. It gets watery. I looked at her. You watch cooking videos now. Maybe. We laughed. It was real. Brief, but real. Flash forward to the wedding 6 years later. Same girl, older dress, more polished. Smile rehearsed. The napkin, the one I'd saved for years and brought that day, was stuffed in a side pocket of my coat. After her speech, the speech where she thanked everyone but me, I sat down at the corner table away from the others. There'd been wine spilled earlier, red, still damp on the tablecloth. And there it was, my embroidered napkin. Someone had used it to mop the mess. The threadwork navy on cream was smudged. The R and the M blurred like tears on ink. I picked it up gently, turning it over in my hand. It was warm, faintly wine-scented. Some corner of me thought, maybe it's not ruined. Maybe it just needs a soak. But that wasn't true. Sometimes you stitch something carefully, fold it neatly, keep it safe for years, and it still ends up stained, used, forgotten. That night, I folded it again. One last time. I'm sorry, sir, the catering manager said, his clipboard shaking just enough for me to notice. Your daughter made some last-minute changes. I stood in the back prep room just off the barn-turned-reception hall. It still smelled of citrus degreaser and smoked brisket. Outside, the sun had barely risen above the paddock's dew still clinging to the grass. I hadn't had coffee yet, but my pulse was already high. Changes, I asked, not raising my voice. That would have been too generous. What sort of changes? He cleared his throat, eyes darting. Well, the hors d'oeuvres for starters. We had originally planned for the bacon-wrapped scallops and your heirloom tomato tartlets, but she opted for shrimp ceviche on Belgian endive and foie gras sliders. I blinked. Also, he continued, flipping a laminated sheet. The beverage list now includes a craft champagne bar. 3 labels, one's from Sonoma. Sonoma doesn't make champagne, I said. He gave a nervous smile. They do now, apparently. I took a breath and stepped aside, leaning against a metal shelf stacked with clear bins of garnishes and linens. My hand brushed something in the inside pocket of my jacket. I pulled it out, the original menu printout. crumpled, folded 3 times, slightly yellowed along the creases. I'd printed it 6 weeks ago at the UPS store, still had the faint smell of toner and stale air conditioning. I smoothed it out against my palm. The entrees were still listed in my small caps, formatting heritage roast chicken, autumn butternut ravioli, cedar plank trout. My initials were at the bottom of the footer, CM Final Draft V3. I flipped the catering manager's laminated version. At the footer, RM Final confirmed. Different ink. Different name. Did she pay for the changes? I asked, not looking up. He hesitated. No, sir. You're still listed as the financial party on record. She said you were aware. Was I assumed. She's the bride. Yes. And I'm the one who signed the original contract. I made the deposit. I approved the first menu. That means something, doesn't it? The chef, young, tall, covered in sleeve tattoos, stepped into the room just then, carrying a tray of wild mushroom terrines. He glanced at me, then at the manager, and then quickly back to his prep station. New face. Hired last minute. I'd never seen him at the tastings. She also nixed the vegetarian platter, the manager mumbled. Said it was too... Bridal shower. I see. There was a silence then. A heavy, sticky kind, like the inside of a refrigerator truck when the power's off. I folded the crumpled menu back into my jacket pocket. It didn't fit neatly anymore. I just pay, I said, voice low but even. But I'm not allowed to pick what's served. The catering manager opened his mouth, then thought better of it. He gave a small, almost apologetic nod. I didn't thank him, didn't need to. I walked past the bins of folded napkins, the ice sculptures melting under plastic wrap. The crates of wine that hadn't been on my list. Outside, the air was colder than I remembered. Frost clung to the barn's eaves. Somewhere in the distance, a generator buzzed to life. I kept walking until I reached the edge of the parking lot. My breath formed little clouds. I stood there for a moment, just breathing. This wasn't about shrimp or sliders or the wine. It was about something far older, something Rosalind hadn't said, but made clear in every change, every omission. This wasn't my wedding. I was merely underwriting it. I reached into my jacket again, pulled out the original contract, the one I'd signed in blue ink. My initials dated, circled in pen, by the catering office. Still valid, still binding. I slid it back into my pocket. It felt heavier now, like a receipt I couldn't return. Sometimes Wes said people forget who built the table they're eating at. His voice echoed in the low ceiling of the church basement, bouncing off folding chairs and the chipped white walls. The overhead fluorescents flickered once, casting a strange sterile hue over the room that made everything look colder than it already felt. I blew on my styrofoam cup, the bitter scent of cheap coffee spiraling upward. My fingers trembled just slightly as they wrapped around it. The cup was thin and hot, like holding on to regret. The folding table in front of us wobbled slightly every time Wes shifted his weight. He sat across from me, guitar case at his side, a blue knit cap still on his head. The same cap he always wore on Thursdays, back when we worked the floor together. Back before my hair turned gray and his son stopped calling. You're not angry because they changed the menu, Wes said. You're angry because they didn't ask. I didn't respond, not right away. My eyes fell to the napkin in my coat pocket, still folded, but no longer crisp. I pulled it out and laid it flat. A tear had opened near the seam, right where her name had been stitched. Rosalind. One corner of the thread had frayed. It looked like something chewed it. Wes noticed and gave a soft grunt. Guess she's grown out of handmade things. The church basement was quiet except for a faint guitar from the next room, someone strumming chords from a hymn. No one sang anymore. Behind us, the snack table stood untouched. Black coffee, a few oatmeal cookies, and a bowl of oranges no one peeled. Everything looked like it had been there for decades. Forgotten, like fathers. I paid for it all, I finally said, eyes still on the napkin. The tent, the food, the flowers. I signed every check. Wes leaned back. And you're the only one who remembers. The clock on the wall ticked loud in the silence between us. I took a sip of coffee. It was too hot, scalding my tongue, but I didn't react. Just swallowed it like everything else I'd kept inside. You don't have to burn the whole house, Wes said softly, breaking the quiet. Just stop leaving the door open for fire. He said it like an old truth, not advice, a warning. I wanted to say something clever, something that would make the ache in my chest feel earned. But instead I pulled out my phone. I scrolled past the weather widget, the unread news, the text from Roslyn that read, "Simply, menus fine. Don't worry, no punctuation." I opened my email draft folder. There it was. The subject line I had typed earlier but never sent, voiding active event agreement. No greeting, no explanation. Just one paragraph written like a man accounting for everything but himself. Wes watched me but didn't speak. He knew better. I glanced up at the bulletin board behind him. Flyers for grief support. Potluck's Bible study. One torn announcement read, "Rebuilding the Table Men's Ministry Weekend." The staples holding it were rusted. I hit backspace on the email, typed a single line instead. "Please cancel remaining services under account number 61402. Effective immediately." I stared at it, then hit save draft. Not yet, but soon. Outside the church, the wind howled past the stained glass windows. I could hear it rattle the gutters. "You ever wish you'd done something different?" I asked. "All the time," Wes said, "but not tonight. Tonight I'm just glad you showed up." I folded the torn napkin and tucked it back into my pocket. It didn't sit right anymore. The seam bulged at the tear as if it refused to go back to its original shape. Before I left, I walked past the snack table, took an orange, peeled it slowly while the guitar strummed a dusty melody in the background. Outside, I stood under the flickering street lamp for a moment before unlocking my car. The light buzzed overhead like a tired apology. Inside the car, I opened my phone one more time. No new messages. I pulled up the draft again. This time, I didn't hesitate. I hit send. The wind lifted slightly, brushing against the windshield like a whisper. I didn't drive home right away. Just sat there holding the orange peel, watching the church slowly fade in my rearview mirror. The sun had begun to dip low, draping the reception field in that misleading golden light, warm to the eyes, but thin on comfort. I stood off to the side of the faux rustic benches, watching as the photographer arranged people like centerpieces in someone else's story. "Let's get one with just the real parents," the photographer called out, her voice chipper, oblivious cutting. I blinked. Real parents. Delora already had her arm linked with Stanford, smiling like a catalog ad. Her new husband stood in polished boots and a suit that fit too well for a man who claimed not to care. Roslyn gave a tiny nod toward them, then waved me back a few steps. No words. Just a little gesture like someone adjusting a lampshade before guests arrived. I hadn't expected a father of the bride pedestal, but I hadn't expected this either. I swallowed and adjusted the boutonniere she'd pinned earlier that day. Roslyn stepped toward me, always smiling, and slid the flower from my lapel with careful fingers. "It'll look cleaner without it," she said. Cleaner. Like I was static. Like I needed to be edited for clarity. I nodded. My fingers suddenly unoccupied, found the folded napkin in my coat pocket, crease-stained now from wine I hadn't spilled. I didn't pull it out, just felt the seams still torn from that night in the church basement. The fibers were softer now, unraveled. Familiar. A country cover of Stand By Me played too loud over the portable speaker. It distorted at the edges like an old radio that hadn't been tuned right since 1993. The photographer clapped. "Let's get the happy family." I took half a step forward. Out of instinct, then stopped. Someone, maybe Delora, maybe Stanford, filled the gap. My presence erased without force. Just omitted. Roslyn looked radiant. I'd waited years to see her glow like that. And yet I couldn't help but notice in the tight shot on the photographer's display, I wasn't even in the background. Not a blurred shape, not a forgotten figure. I wasn't in the story. Roslyn walked over after the photo, brushing something invisible off her gown. She didn't meet my eyes. "It's for the album," she said. "It's just optics." "Right," I murmured. "Optics," she added. "You're not the main character here, Dad." I took a breath. Never was. Just the guy who paid for props. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. I was just observing, like a man reviewing a spreadsheet he'd seen too many times. Her eyes fluttered once, uncertain if I'd meant it as bitterness or fact. I didn't clarify. She turned away. The moment passed like a misfiled receipt, important only later. I walked off toward the edge of the field, where the benches gave way to uneven ground and the scent of manure mingled with the lingering smoke from the catering tent. The napkin was still in my pocket, wrinkled, wine-stained, a seam frayed enough to catch on the lining. I should have thrown it away, but I didn't. Instead, I pulled out my phone. The reception bars were faint but stable. I opened the vendor portal. Scroll, tap, tap again. Cancel contract. Confirm. I hovered my finger over the button. In the distance, Stanford laughed loud, performative hollow. The photographer clicked through preview shots on her screen. And I stood there no longer holding my place in the picture, but considering whether I ever belonged in it to begin with. My feet led me toward the back of the tent, past stacks of extra folding chairs and a cooler half-latched. I wasn't sure where I was going, just away. Along the fence line, the sun caught the edge of a discarded champagne flute, empty, tilted in the grass like it had given up on being noticed. I picked it up out of habit and set it upright on the table beside the gift registry cards. The name tags on the table were hand-lettered all in Rosalind's curling script. One read Dad. It wasn't mine. I found mine Clarence in the stack of unclaimed place cards, not placed at the head table, just floating among the extras like a guest someone forgot to seat. I let the edge of the card scrape my thumb before I tucked it into my wallet. Maybe I'd keep it. Maybe I'd toss it later next time I cleaned out the glove compartment. The reception roared on behind me. Laughter, the clink of forks against plates. A cousin's toddler shrieking with joy. Life continued gracelessly, loudly, without the need for sentiment. Inside the tent, Rosalind danced with Stanford. The photographer crouched low to get the angle. The light hit just right. I imagined the caption under that photo, "Father and bride share a moment." Except it wasn't me. Never was. My phone buzzed in my hand. A calendar reminder I hadn't disabled. Finalize invoice, catering code due 5 p.m. I stared at it. The clock read 4:57. My thumb slid over the screen again. Cancel contract. Confirm. I tapped once. A confirmation pop-up asked if I was sure. Somewhere in the back of my mind, Wes's voice echoed, "You don't have to burn the whole house. Just stop leaving the door open for fire." But maybe this wasn't fire. Maybe it was ash. Just cold gray ash. I tapped yes. The screen blinked. The portal returned to its home page. Done. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and exhaled. A long breath. Not relief. Not closure. Just breath. I turned to head back, but not to the tent. Not to the camera flashes and the curated speeches, and the man wearing my role like a tailored suit. Instead, I walked toward my car. I passed the horses in their paddock. One snorted as I passed its breath misting into the dusk. Before I got in, I took out the napkin again, folded it one last time. The wine stain had darkened. The tear had widened, but it was still mine. And for the first time in a long time, I let myself admit that was enough. I didn't cancel the food because of anger. I canceled it because for the first time, I understood I didn't belong there. That morning, the house was too quiet. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, but the heavy, unfamiliar stillness that sets in after something final. My kitchen window let in a dull gray light that flattened everything it touched. Even the toast I'd made burned slightly, like always sat untouched, curling at the edges. The blinking red light on my answering machine flashed once, then again. I poured a cup of coffee, left it steaming on the counter, and sat down at the table without taking a sip. My hands were already resting on the folder from the caterer contract invoice revisions. Somewhere near the bottom was the signature line that used to say, Clarence G. Payton. Now someone had scribbled that out in blue pen. Next to it, paid by Cow. Blank. Like I'd never been there at all. I picked up the phone, pressed the number saved under events. It rang twice before a smooth voice answered. "Good morning, Lexington Gourmet Events. How may I assist you?" "This is Clarence Payton," I said, voice even. "Account number 61402. I need to confirm cancellation." There was a pause. Papers rustled. "Yes, sir. We received your preliminary request yesterday. Do you wish to finalize the cancellation?" "I do." "Understood. We'll void the contract and issue the appropriate adjustment within 7 business days. Thank you." As I hung up, the red light blinked again. Voicemail, Roslyn. I hesitated, then pressed play. Dad, hey. I just got word from the venue about the food. What's going on? Can you call me? I let it finish. The next message started automatically. Dad, seriously, what is happening? Guests are asking about the brunch. You didn't say anything. Why would you just cancel? I don't understand. Please call me. There was one more. From just 15 minutes ago. I need to talk to you. This isn't how it's supposed to go, Dad. I don't get why you're doing this. I mean, I know you don't talk much, but I thought you were okay with how things were going. You smiled in the pictures. Did I do something wrong? The phone rang. Liv this time. I let it buzz once, twice, then answered. Hi, I said. There was a beat of silence. Dad, her voice cracked. You canceled the catering. Yes. Why, I mean, God, what happened? You didn't even talk to me. I waited a breath before speaking. You threw a party, Roslyn. And somewhere between the seating chart and the photo sessions I got uninvited. What? No, you were there, front row. You walked me down the aisle. I did. But after that it was like I vanished. She was quiet. Then softly I thought you didn't want to be involved. That's the thing, I said. You never asked. You just assumed. There was another pause. I could hear her breathing, trying to frame the next sentence like it mattered. You've never said much, Dad. You always just did things. I thought you were okay with staying in the background. I didn't say anything, I replied slowly, because I thought actions were enough. The words hung there brittle and bare. I didn't want fancy, she said. I just wanted the day to go right. I paid for it all, Roslyn. And I wasn't even allowed to pick the salad. That's not fair. It's not about the salad. She sighed, but this one sounded younger. Like a breath from when she was still small enough to sit in my lap and pick croutons off her soup. I didn't mean to make you feel erased. I looked at the napkin I'd folded and unfolded a dozen times that morning. A corner was still stained from last night's wine. I traced the edge with my thumb. It had started to fray where the seam once held strong. I know, I said, but meaning well doesn't fix everything. The silence came again, longer this time. No background noise, just the absence of words. Are you okay? She asked. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to tell her that I'd already eaten breakfast, that the toast wasn't burnt, that the coffee was still hot. But none of it would have been true. I will be, I said. Then gently I hung up the phone. The kitchen hummed again with the low sound of the fridge motor. Outside, a leaf scraped across the window in a lazy circle. My coffee was cold. I drank it anyway. The guests were lovely, polite, grateful, until they realized the brisket wasn't coming. It started subtly, like wind shifting before a storm. At first, just a few puzzled glances toward the buffet table. Then the gentle tap of fingers against empty chafing dishes. No steam, no scent, no second helpings. I wasn't there, but I imagined it easily. The low thrum of country music still bouncing off the tent canopy. The laughter softening into questions. Did they run out already? Wasn't there supposed to be more, somewhere near the faux rustic arch? Roslyn stood stiff as a fence post. Her smile didn't break, but it definitely cracked. Where's the brisket? Someone finally asked out loud. Heath tried to pivot. We've got plenty of hors d'oeuvres, try the goat cheese tartlets, but no one came to a wedding for goat cheese. Roslyn moved quickly toward the staff tent. Her heels sank slightly into the soft ground, a quiet betrayal of terrain. She cornered the catering manager, who was clearly not the one from the planning meetings, and pulled her aside. Where's the rest of the food? Roslyn asked, her tone too high to sound casual. The woman hesitated. The client canceled the hot course. Roslyn's face flattened. What client? The one listed on the contract, she said, flipping through the clipboard. Clarence Tyne. Roslyn blinked once, slowly. But he was just paying. I gave you the updated plan. We never received the final deposit, the manager replied, voice wobbling between defensiveness and apology. Roslyn's breath caught. That's impossible. Stanford appeared, then slightly flushed, tugging at his collar. He leaned in close to Delora. Did you confirm the second deposit? Delora's expression froze mid-sip of her sparkling cider. I thought you did. Meanwhile, the guests had begun to murmur in earnest. Phones were out. A few teenagers recorded the caterers packing things up quietly behind the tent. On social media, someone captioned a short clip when the wedding love story runs out of sides and entrees. A friend of Heath's nudged him. Man, I guess this is like interpretive catering minimalist vibes. Heath laughed, but the tension in his eyes didn't. Back by the guest book table, Rosalind picked at her French braid. Her hair had been done perfectly hours ago, but now it felt like a crown made of thorns. A young cousin asked if there'd be cake soon. She nodded absently, unable to make her voice work. She turned away and caught sight of the photographer adjusting lenses near a stack of props. The boutonniere Clarence had removed was lying there, still fresh, still his. I told him he could pick the brisket, Rosalind murmured mostly to herself. That was the deal. Heath sidled up beside her. What deal? Doesn't matter, she said quickly. Then, after a pause, maybe I should have just let him make the damn brisket. Heath gave her hand a light squeeze. It's still a beautiful day. Rosalind didn't answer. Her phone buzzed. A new message from Dad. She hesitated, then tapped the screen. You always had a seat at my table. You just never used it. No exclamation point, no guilt trip, just words, soft final, folded like the corners of a cloth napkin. She read it again. The tent grew louder, somehow lonelier. The wind carried the scent of lilacs and something else. Smoke. No, just memory. Rosalind pressed the phone to her chest and sat down at the edge of the dance floor. The music played on, but she didn't hear it. She only saw a table years ago with mismatched dishes and a napkin embroidered with her name, and a man learning how to make spaghetti. The first woman to arrive held a toddler in one arm and a grocery list in the other. Her sweatshirt was 3 washes past its prime, and her ponytail was hanging on by a thread. But she had sharp eyes and a cautious kind of hope. I recognized the look. I'd seen it in Rosalind once back when she was trying not to ask for more than what I had left to give. The basement still smelled faintly of last Sunday's hymnals and this morning's disinfectant. The chilly crock-pot in the back corner gave off a steady hum. Wes stood behind the registration table, happily greeting each new face with a clipboard and a styrofoam cup of weak coffee. I'd gotten there early, earlier than I needed to, really. Set out 20 chairs in a rough circle, pinned a few handmade flyers on the corkboard budget by the plate. Finance isn't scary, and stretch that dollar like you mean it. Each chair had a cloth napkin on it, hand-stitched, each one with a different name. I'd spent evenings hunched over the work like some widowed tailor, stabbing my thumb more times than I'll admit. But it kept my hands busy, and it reminded me that things, even people, can be repaired with enough patience. One napkin still bore the scar from where it had torn down the seam. That one I kept separate, folded neatly, and placed on the chair at the far end of the room. No name on it, just waiting. Good turnout, Wes said, sliding in beside me. You got your opening line ready. I was just going to wing it, I replied. He chuckled. You always were better without a script. By 10:10, we had 16 people seated. Most were young parents, single or close to it, eyes scanning the room like it might judge them. I cleared my throat. I used to think budgeting was about spreadsheets, I began. But then I realized it's about dinner tables. Who eats what's on the plate and what's left in the fridge? A few heads nodded. One woman shifted her baby to the other hip and took out a pen. We're not here to cut coupons, I continued. We're here to make peace with the numbers, the same way we try to make peace with our people. The workshop began. We passed out sample meal plans, chicken chili rice with black beans and sweet potatoes, pasta that could stretch across 3 nights if you got creative. The chili in the back made its rounds to steam, curling under the flickering church light like a ribbon. Each time someone got a question right or shared a money-saving tip, I handed them one of the napkins. They're stitched by hand, I said. Each one's got a name because no meal should be faceless. No budget should be nameless. Near the end, a young mom, barely more than a teenager, held up the napkin that said Claire. She looked at me with curious eyes. Did your daughter help you make these? I paused, smiled. No, but maybe one day she'll teach me how to fold them. A few people chuckled. Wes patted my shoulder like a benediction. After most of the participants had left, a few lingered, pouring second helpings or gathering their things. A man in a faded veteran's cap approached me holding the napkin that read Ruth. He turned it over in his calloused hands. "You stitch all these," I nodded. "Takes a while, but I've got time." He folded it slowly and tucked it into his jacket pocket. "I'll give it to my granddaughter. She's about to start school. Likes things that look like they matter." That stuck with me. Things that look like they matter. I swept the floor slowly, letting the scuff of the broom echo in the wide room. Each stripe of the linoleum tile had been waxed recently. It shone in places, dull in others. Kind of like life. At the end of the table, Wes was quietly packing up leftover flyers. He looked at me with a knowing smile of the kind you earn after a few decades of messing up and showing up anyway. "You ever think you'd be doing this?" he asked. "Teaching?" I said. "Never. I used to think spreadsheets were the only way to solve a problem." Wes laughed. "Turns out chili and napkins do the trick." My phone buzzed again. Another message from Roslyn, this one longer. "Dad, I'm sorry. I didn't know what I was pushing away. But I see it now." I stared at her words, then tapped out a reply slowly. "The table's still here. So is your seat." I didn't hit send right away. I reread it 3 times. Simple, honest, no lecture. Outside, the wind carried a scent of newly bloomed dogwood trees. Spring in Kentucky always smelled like something starting again. Before locking up, I walked back to the empty chair, the one with the stitched napkin and no name. I placed a ceramic plate in front of it. Nothing fancy, just something solid. Then I laid out a fork and spoon. I didn't know when she'd show up, but the place was ready. The midday light slid through the narrow church window and landed on the last napkin I stitched burnt thread, and all but it held. I don't wait for calls anymore. But every chair set at that table says the same thing. There's still a place if someone ever wants to come back. Forgiveness, I've learned, isn't about who deserves it. It's about who needs peace. Sometimes absence is what lets you hear your own voice best. Has life ever handed you a second chance in disguise? Share your story in the comments or follow the channel if you'd like more quiet stories like this one.